Okay, so our next series is going to be percussion. I think there's more than five scores, but they're categorized all over the place. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, let's start with Xenakis Rebonds, which is a 12-minute sort of staple of contemporary solo percussion repertoire. And it's from the late 80s, dedicated to Silvio Gualda. I'm assuming that's the percussionist who premiered it. And first part is for two bongos, three toms, and two bass drums. The second part is for two bongos, tuba, tom, bass drum, and five wood blocks. So it's all unpitched percussion. This isn't our first Xenakis episode, so I encourage you to go to the first one to get his biography more or less. He's a super interesting figure in contemporary music. And we also have a quote here at the beginning of the score. An immense abstract ritual, a suite of movements and of hammerings without any folkloristic contamination. Pure music full of marvelously efflorescent rhythms, going beyond drama and tempest, a new masterpiece. I'm not sure if that is taken from somewhere else or if it's about Rebonds, and it's just a part of this edition, but and here you go. This is what the start of the first part looks like. It's at quarter equals 40. This is what the start of the second part looks like. The wood blocks have their own stave at the top, and it's at quarter equals 60. If you want to listen along with me, the recording's in the video description. And then if once I'm done with this, I will let you know my thoughts, things I heard on this listen today. And yeah, I'm excited to revisit this. So let's do it. Okay, so I was not able to find um, one recording, like one performance of both back to back. It seems that it's much more popular to either perform one or the other. Um, on the page, they're both about the same length, but because of the tempo difference, Rebonds A is much longer. I think, and I think Rebonds A is less interesting. Um, Rebonds B has like all of these woodblock moments and this like grace note figure that takes over the piece at one point. It's got a lot of like different ideas, whereas Rebonds A is more of like a slow build and it doesn't really break with the idea until the very end here. Um, yeah, I think it's a pretty original work. Like, I think this inspired a lot of percussion writing, a lot of composers. Like, I think the composer to the film score of Acura mentioned a Xenakis influence, and I think it's definitely influenced by pieces like this, like these his percussion works, which I think are probably his most performed pieces today. Um, like he has a lot of piano works, but they're more famous for being difficult than being performed. And he has like, similarly, his orchestra pieces don't get played that much. I guess there was an album of Xenakis's like electronic music released recently that was um, brought attention to that. So maybe that's popular too. It's a fascinating thing, like unpitched percussion solo. Um, like every performance of this that I've heard has a completely different sound because the performer also gets to pick the instruments that they're playing on and like tailor the sound of them to how they think this piece should sound. So it's actually a really interesting little sound world and mostly like drums and wood. There's like no metal, unpitched metal. So I think that's why people might want to compare it to like folkloristic things. I mean, it brings to mind like um, prehistory and things like that. But it's obviously there's something behind the composing of it that is very modern and procedural. Um, so yeah, I think there's another solo percussion piece by Xenakis. So if you're interested in this, I would check that out. It might be Safa. I don't have the score to it, but yeah, that's that. Next will be uh, Per Nørgård piece called I Ching, and that's also a really big one. So the first three scores we're looking at are all going to be very big 20th century percussion works. Okay, so today I'm going to be listening to I Ching by Per Nørgård. This is a solo percussion piece which I saw live at Western University in the context of a percussion recital. And can't remember how I got a hold of the score, but it was written in 1982, then published in 87, and this is the 2009 edition. It's a significant piece. It's like 4 movements, 25 minutes long, and it was written for Gerrit Mortensen. The titles of the movements here: Thunder Repeated, The Image of Shock, The Taming Power of the Small, The Gentle, The Penetrating, and Towards Completion, Fire Over Water. Your percussion list is so the way that Nørgård has it set up here is he has the list and these boxed letters representing them, and then he has he has like a diagram with the letters that correspond to it. This is really good practice. So large roto drum, 4 tube drums, tamburino, long metal pipe, Peking opera gong, small metal pipe, and another Peking opera gong, or no, a Peking opera block, then 2 rototoms, 4 slit drums, tuned gongs, temple cup bells, and bell tree. So a lot of like pitched and unpitched metals and like very resonant, almost pitched, like woods and um, membranophones. Then this is not a bird's eye view, this is a side view of the gongs. So you need like, uh, I'll just rattle through the pitches. So for the bigger gongs, you need a set of 4, F sharp 3, G sharp 3, A sharp 3, B 3. Then you have a set of 7 medium-sized gongs, D4, E4, F sharp 4, G sharp 4, A4, A sharp 4, B4. And then the high gongs, there should be 8 of them, D5, E5, F sharp 5, G sharp 5, A5, A sharp 5, B5, and C6. So movement 2, you need a glass bowl, a cowbell, flexitone, Indian, monochord, voice, rototrom, drum, metal pieces of gongs, and then another rototom. So the rototoms overlap, but then there's a bunch of other smaller auxiliary things. And then the third one, this is probably the most famous movement. It's for kalimba on top of timpani, and you can actually buy a kalimba made specifically for this piece. I don't know if it's off the composer's website or not. I just remember this percussionist telling me. But its tuning is on the left hand, D sharp, C sharp, B, high C sharp, E, and then low B. And then on the right hand, or the right side of the kalimba, it's E, F sharp, A, G sharp, the G sharp an octave above, A, B, and it's sort of like, I guess it's more of a zigzag pattern on the right side. So, yeah, very weird. Also, you need to put two temple bowls on top of the timpani. These should be pitched to E and A. So the setup looks kind of like this. I don't know if you can see this, but so that's the third movement. And then the fourth movement, again, we have the diagram thing with letters. And this setup actually has bass drum, hi-hat, Chinese and Korean gongs, vibraphone. That's our first big like mallet percussion thing. Temple blocks, um, Bali or Balinese or Javanese gong, mark tree. I think the first movement also had a mark tree. Like seven gongs, or seven tom-toms, my mistake. And an anklung. This is vertical bamboo tubes, which are tuned in octaves. This is so like really eclectic arrangement of percussion instruments from all over the world. Um, this is what the fourth movement setup looks like, according to the percussionist who premiered this. I mean, this is just an insane setup to do all these movements. I guess that's sort of what the piece is known for, though. It's like infamous for how spectacular it is, how big the setup is. Obviously, the third movement is the most performed because it's the smallest setup and it's also the most interesting setup with the little kalimba. But yeah, there you go. I'm just gonna say a few things about Nørgård and maybe something about Gert Mortensen if I can find it. Oh, I think I'll have to do this on my phone, but because I don't have any Wi-Fi on my laptop here. Per Nørgård is a Danish composer. He died very recently, actually, just this past May, and he was born in 1932. His work has a lot of different styles and periods, but there's a focus on lyricism. Julian Anderson called Nørgård's style one of the most personal in contemporary music. If you aren't familiar, Julian Anderson has written a lot about like spectralism and spectral techniques, and Nørgård is famous for his microtonal music and use of the Infinity series to generate music, so like sort of process-based stuff. And these are like spectral adjacent ideas. Yeah, just scrolling through, he has a huge body of work. I can't imagine it's all performed that much though, but one piece that I know of his, which I don't have the score for, is this orchestra piece, Voyage into the Golden Screen from 1968. I would really recommend listening to that too if you like this piece, even though it's something completely different. It's a really interesting sound world. Okay, and then Gert Mortensen. Okay, so Gert Mortensen is quite a bit younger than Per. He was born in the 50s, 1958, and he has been professor at the Royal Academy of Music in Copenhagen for the past 23 years. He's head of timpani and percussion there. So obviously a very good person to promote your work if you were a Danish composer. I'm sure Nørgård was pretty established by the time this was written, though. I'll let you know my thoughts just after this short transition. And if you'd like to listen along, there is a link to a recording in the video description, as always. Okay, so admittedly, my laptop ran out of batteries halfway through the last movement, so I just listened to the recording without the score for a while. Um, But yeah, one of the most interesting things I noticed about this score was the use of repetition, either in these small cells that transform. This idea is sort of introduced in the third movement, and also um, just in the first movement, large sections of score being repeated. I think the first movement, um, there are there's one section that's repeated 3 times, and then two other sections that are repeated twice, and there's the intro, and then you repeat all of that again, and then you repeat the intro again, and then there's a coda. So it's like really 4 minutes of music stretched out over like 10 minutes, and that's really weird for something that's in sort of a modernist idiom. Um, like if I tried to do that if I tried to bring that to a composition lesson, it would be, I'd get in a lot of trouble, I think. I don't think there's a lot of composers teaching modernist music who would want a student to do that. So it's pretty bold, I think, in its use of repetition. Also, it's like I can't think of another solo percussion piece which has a setup this big. And I think there's something to be said for like the big budget aspect of it. Like every most universities will have a percussion studio that is big enough to do this. But no like independent musician is going to have access to all of this stuff. So you really need to get support for a performance of this size. But it also showcases like all of the equipment you have if you're an institution. Um, so it's really well suited to like the faculty recital kind of thing. The third movement's obviously the most original, and it's a really interesting like break in the piece that you get more like E major territory for a long time. It's as long as the first movement really, and you get it's much quieter. Like it just cannot get as loud as the other movements, so I think that's cool. The second movement is very strange. It's just so short, and noticed that there's quite a few performances online that just omit the second movement, which I think is kind of interesting. Like I don't know too much about Nørgård's music, but I would imagine this is one of his most performed works. Um, so I think it's pretty successful in that sense. Okay, so on the docket next. Oh yes, of course. We're gonna look at the King of Denmark by Morton Feldman. Okay, today I'm gonna set aside a little bit of time to listen to The King of Denmark by American composer Morton Feldman. This is a solo percussion piece with a very interesting score. It's one of Feldman's grid paper pieces, written in 1965. Um, and it's for solo percussion. You can see that each line of the musical score is just a 3 by something grid, and then in these boxes he has different symbols. So on this first line we have grace notes, dashed lines, numbers, and the letter R. And on the previous page he sort of explains what all these things mean. So the way this piece works is that you read it from like left to right as a regular score, but instead of bar lines or rhythms, like each box is just a beat. Slowest you can play it is quarter equals 66. Um, and then sort of like a staff, you have these different regions um, with high at the top and low at the bottom. Medium, like the middle row of boxes is going to be like your medium sounds, then high, then low, and I think there can be sounds on the lines. that are extremely high or extremely low. The performer is to sort of decide what the instruments are. It's sort of a open instrumentation, although some things are required. And then it's a multi-percussion setup. Um, Feldman wants the dynamics to be extremely quiet, and thick horizontal lines indicate clusters. This happens sort of on the third page of the score. Well, yeah, these things. It's very open, but also very specific. It's kind of weird in that sense. And yeah, you do require a vibraphone because, and a glockenspiel, an antique cymbal, because that's the last thing you hear at the end of the piece. So yeah, it sort of embraces this variability in what percussionists play when they have a multi-perc setup. It gives a little bit more freedom, but it obviously requires a lot of different percussion instruments that can be played in sequence very rapidly. Yeah, if we look at this performance by Colin Frank, we have triangle, five, yeah, six gongs, and then a little washboard also suspended maraca, a little finger cymbal, maybe another gong here, brake drum and three different cowbells, tin can, toy snare drum, a piece of ceramic like flower pot, and then three different sizes of cymbal, a timpani at the back, bongos, conga, tom tom, mark tree, and all of this is close mic'd. Vibraphone is on the other side here. So that's sort of what the piece looks like in performance, more or less. I'm gonna have a link to this in the video description just so you can see it performed, because I think the score is fairly easy to come by if you're curious. And yeah, it's not a particularly long piece, like it's 3 pages long, and 6 minutes. So I'm just gonna give it a listen, and I'll let you know my thoughts. Okay, yeah. So my thoughts on this, I think it's probably his most successful grid paper piece, and it's surprisingly busy. I know there's a lot of silence and like moments for things to ring, but compared to late Feldman, it's a very busy piece. There's lots of sounds going on all the time, and I like this sort of like you can kind of see patterns in the score that emerge, like these two phrases here. You have uh, two, like you have four sounds at the same time, medium and low here, and then around the same point in the next line, medium and high, four sounds also vibrating. And similarly, you have like these little interludes of gongs, then skin, then cymbals, then bell-like sounds, and then as many different sounds as possible. Sort of breaking up the piece. The way that it's written out, it's sort of it looks very rigid, like you get one beat after another. But the way it's always interpreted is like very loose and free because, well, you have to make your way to all of these different sounds, and it's kind of hard to do that all in one beat. I think if you did like a very rigid performance of this, it wouldn't sound very musical, and that's not what most performers do. There's this very rubato feeling to any performance I've heard of this. Part of the fun is also like trying to make a setup that makes this work. So it's a nice little exercise in multi-perc setup stuff. Next, we're going to listen to some Kaija Saariaho. She has a piece for percussion and electronics. I think it's called Six Japanese Gardens. So that'll be the next one. it might be our third Saariaho episode as well, so that's good. I usually make a playlist once I have three pieces from a single composer, so yeah, that'll be that. So today I'm going to be listening to a piece for percussion and electronics by Kaija Saariaho. It's called Six Japanese Gardens, and it dates from the 90s. So this is a older piece of hers. It's a collection of impressions of the gardens she saw in Kyoto during her stay in Japan in 1993. It's in 6 parts, which have their own rhythmic material. All the work for processing and mixing the pre-recorded material was done with a Mac in Saariaho's home studio. Some of the transformations are made with resonant filters in the Chant program. The Chant program, if you're not familiar, is like a famous early tool that was made at Earcom. And this would have been after Saariaho studied at Earcom in France. And then it also involves the use of a SVP phaser vocoder. And she was assisted by Jean-Baptiste Barrière. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. Final mixing was made in Pro Tools with the assistance of Hans-Peter Stube Teiljerg. And the piece is commissioned by the Kunitachi College of Music and written for Shinichi Ueno. So I've never read through this, but it's actually it's kind of interesting, all the collaboration that goes into a piece like this. A lot of people, in the U.S. especially, are doing this sort of thing, like solo musician and electronics, but obviously the technology has become so affordable that most composers just do all this kind of thing themselves, and it's all digital nowadays. But this is sort of like old enough that it's a lot of analog stuff, and there may be a digital mock-up of it in Maximus P or something, but like the equipment list here is like triggering pedal, a Yamaha SPX 1000, a MIDI interface, a Lexicon LXP15, some directional microphones, a PA mixer, stereo amplification. Okay, and there's some stuff going on in a computer. So there's like a mix of like digital and analog equipment. But I mean, I have no idea how you would go about setting this thing up. The instrumentation list, if you're interested, is triangle, metal plate, woodblock, log drum, stones, some suspended cymbals, finger cymbals, gongs, an octave of crotals, a Chinese drum, tambourine, timpani, which is probably the most expensive thing out of all of this, and a tam-tam. But however you come to this piece, I invite you to listen along with me. I'm going to cut to the next section of the video where I'm going to talk about my thoughts post-listen. If you'd like to listen in between, I would pause the video here. Okay, so these are pretty fun. It's hard to write 6 movement works or 6 miniatures like spanning 15 minutes like this. I think it's a really awkward number of pieces. You got to keep it interesting somehow, and I think Saariaho does a good job of like keeping the variety going, even though there's no like it's really mostly unpitched percussion. Even the pitched stuff is treated as if it were unpitched. The I guess the meat and potatoes of it is the first 4 movements, but the last 2 I think are more interesting. They're more like textural ones that slowly evolve. And the 4th one is a nice break from having electronics. It's just a straight percussion piece. And it's only 1 page, so I would, if you're a percussionist, I would check this page out and try to practice it. It looks like a lot of fun. Um, Also, the setup for this must be crazy. Like just looking at the way it's notated, it's so much to coordinate. It must be really visually interesting, all the movement that has to happen to make it work. The timpani introduction in the last movement is very satisfying. The opening movement is probably the most interesting one. It's just a timbral exploration, just exploring the different timbres of the setup. Um, because a lot of the material is like uh, algorithmic, you could say, or like slowly evolving, it was kind of a frustrating listen because nothing lasts as long as I wanted it to last. I wanted all of these ideas to go on much longer and slowly evolve as you would expect in like a spectral piece for percussion. And it just never did that. It was just always like kind of truncated and short and miniaturized. And I don't know if it was entirely successful. It looks like a lot of fun to put together, but yeah, it's just sort of a weird thing like spectral miniatures. Next, we're gonna go into a bunch of James Tenney postal pieces. He actually wrote three of them for percussion, so that'll be a quick detour. Okay, so today I'm going to be listening to another piece by American composer James Tenney. This is one of his postal pieces. It's called For Percussion, perhaps, or dot 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 night in brackets. Um, this was composed in this on the 6th of August, 1971. I'm pretty sure, and it's just a text score. You can see it here. The text reads very soft, very long, nearly white, and that's the whole piece. Um, Tenney, as I mentioned in a previous episode, was a member of the Fluxus movement, but I didn't really get into it that much, so maybe this would be a good opportunity to talk about the Fluxus movement a little bit, and also this dedicatee Harold Budd, if I can find anything on them. So Fluxus was really big in the 60s and 70s, and it was inspired by composer John Cage. I don't think we've actually looked at any John Cage yet. The term intermedia was coined around this time by Fluxus artist Dick Higgins. This is sort of the birth of conceptual art, and video art started to take off a little bit here. Many artists in the 1960s took place in these activities, so it was often something that people did tangentially while, like, aside from their main practice. Um, some of the big names here are, of course, Yoko Ono, John Cage, as I mentioned before, George Brecht. Um, if you are more of a music listener like myself, you probably recognize Terry Riley, Allison Knowles, Lamont Young, Namjoon Paik. So John Cage taught a series of classes in experimental composition at the New School of Social Research in New York City. These talks explored notions of chance and indeterminacy in art. And this, of course, inspired other artists. Cage wasn't completely original in his ideas. He was definitely influenced by the ready-made artist Marcel Duchamp. He was also interested in Zen Buddhism and, of course, Dada, anti-art, things like that. So this is sort of like a resurgence of things that were happening at the turn of the 20th century. I guess what's important to this piece by James Tenney is like this is really a time when text scores started to become a thing, where you had these very loose, abstract scores, which musicians would have to work with in sort of an improvisatory manner. Um, I don't know enough about it to know what like the first proper text scores were, but you could say that John Cage's famous piece, like 4 minutes and 33 seconds, is kind of like a text score. It reads just three movements, all of them marked tacit or whatever, silent, right? So he's instructing the player to be silent for lengths of time. And then that sort of evolved into text scores which were even more abstract, like this one. So this is dedicated to Harold Budd, whom I know nothing about, so I'm really just reading the Wikipedia article here. This was a American composer and poet, lived from 36 to 2020. I guess it looks like he has these ambient piano works with soft pedal, a technique that he sort of developed. It's probably like half pedaling, I would think. And I guess he's not so much on the classical music side. It looks like he has a lot of albums and is more firmly in the like experimental music, ambient music kind of thing. So it's kind of interesting. This is a lot of Tenney's postal pieces are dedicated to musicians and performers, but this one is dedicated to a composer. So I guess if you were to perform this piece, it might be useful to listen to Bud's music, uh, because that probably gives some important information about like what kind of sound world Tenney is thinking about here. There's a number of different like Tenney compilation albums. It looks like that have this have done this piece. I'm gonna listen to the New World Records one because I think this is the one I've heard before. But this is a performance on trombone. See, it's kind of variable. Um, Maybe the SoundCloud version is percussion. Okay, this one looks interesting because it has a lot of credits, but it's more of a chamber version. I'm looking for one that's just solo percussion because I think that's a more authentic way of doing it. Surprisingly hard to find a version that is not for something incredibly weird. Um, yeah, I think I'm gonna go with this one, even though I don't know who the performers are. I think this guy is a percussionist. I mean, yeah. So this is gonna be a solo percussion version. I'm 90% sure. Okay. All of these recordings are quite long. I guess because one of the directions is very long. So this is a 21-minute recording. I'm gonna have a listen here with good headphones. Maybe just lie back and relax, and I'll let you know my thoughts on the piece and the interpretation. Okay, yeah. So I really like this interpretation. I think it stays really true to the score and sort of observes as many things in it as I would. There's these long stretches of like sustained percussion sounds, which have a bit of overlap. So I'm not sure if this was something performed live or more prepared in a studio. Yeah, the sounds are really cool. They're all clearly very close mic'd. One of them is not very soft, but I guess the timbre was kind of soft, even though the dynamic was loud. So certainly, like these are each like 2 or 3 minutes stretches of sound, so very long. And then, of course, the more abstract indications in the score are the title "Night" and then the "Nearly White," which you know suggests some sort of luminosity, but also some sort of darkness. I think the performer here interpreted that as like super low frequency sounds and super high frequency sounds and sort of commingling them. And I think it worked really well. And then, so the body of the score is not just presented in one line or all left aligned. It's sort of staggered with this indentation and this double indentation, which I guess sort of guides your eye down and across the page, um, suggesting, I don't know, some sort of forward progression in time, some sort of very slow forward motion, um, or like maybe staggered, like stair type motion. The way that this recording is laid out, funnily enough, is sort of like that. It's like one thing after another with some overlap, sort of staggered in this staircase arrangement, and that could be inspired just by the way the score looks. So if you're making a text score yourself, that's something to think about. Is like it's not just about the words you put on the page, it's also the way you make it all look. Like this was written on the back of a postcard, and it's purposefully like limited and minimalistic, and it results in performances that sound like that. So yeah, that was for percussion, perhaps, or Night by James Tenney. I just assumed this was a straight percussion piece, but it seems that a lot of other people have interpreted it to be for variable instrumentation. Um, but if you're a percussionist, I think it's a very interesting score to look at. And we're going to be looking at two other James Tenney scores that are more explicitly for percussion. So to do all three of them, I think would be a lot of fun. Okay, today I'm going to be exploring this text score by composer James Tenney. It's from his Postal Pieces. This is a really early one, 1965, um, and it's pretty clearly for percussion. It's called MAXIMUSIC, and it's for Max Neuhaus. It has three instructions, so I guess the piece is divided into like three sections. No set duration, mind you. First section, soft roll on a large cymbal, consonant, resonant, very long. Not sure what he means about consonants, but carrying on. So the second part is a sudden, loud, fast improvisation on all the other instruments, in brackets percussion, except the tam-tams, especially but not only non-sustaining ones. So constant texture, continue until nearly exhausted from physical effort. That's very Fluxus sounding, but not as long as one. So this section cannot be as long as the first section. End with the tam-tams. Just one blow as loud as possible. So there's very clearly a shorter section here that has a bit more specific stuff, and then it has a very specific ending. 3 is the same as section 1, but now inaudible until all the other sounds have faded. Okay, interesting. And has to be shorter than both 1 and 2. So it's kind of like an ABA form. It's sort of poetic, like the idea of 2 bleeding into 3. And there's something strange about this idea of like the symbol kind of emerging out of this noise texture, like it's inaudible as it enters. That's kind of an interesting idea. And considering you hit the tam-tam last, that's probably the last sound that's going to fade out. But it's also a bit variable because there are all the other percussion instruments are variable. So Max Neuhaus, born in 1939, died in 2009. Notable interpreter of contemporary and experimental percussion music in the 1960s. So this is clearly who it's for. Born in Texas, spent his childhood in New York, moving to Houston, and I guess his culmination of his work is Electronics and Percussion, this album that was released in 1968. I guess it was very revolutionary for its time. His first independent art, like works as an independent artist, were sound walks. Actually, he invited audiences to walk with him through the streets of New York City. Even where I am here in Winnipeg, people have also led sound walks, and on more than one occasion, I've been in like a workshop or school situation where I've had to do a sound walk. So this is a practice that became very popular. I don't know if he started it, but certainly 1966 is very early to be doing this sort of thing. Yeah, I hope he was happy with this piece that Tenney wrote for him with this funny pun-like title. Okay, so there's a couple versions online. I'm gonna listen to this one, which is a solo version from 2015, and yeah, I'll let you know what I think. This is a long interpretation, in my opinion. It's 7 minutes. Okay, my thoughts on this. It was a really easy listen. This is definitely a very prescriptive like score, but there was some liberties that the musician took here. Like they took the first section quite long at 4 minutes, and they took the second section with like a lot of sort of straight sixteenths and just sort of banging on various unpitched things. And I think the build up was pretty effective. I don't know if the going crazy was as crazy as it could have gone, but it's yeah, very straightforward, effective portrayal of what Tenney asked for with this one. And I'm glad I took the time to listen to it. I haven't listened to every one of these, and this is a first for me. I always like the title. In my opinion, it's one of the less interesting ones. It's like really early, so he's still sort of in Fluxus mode and just focusing on like these sort of text scores. Whereas the later ones are more influenced by his electronic music experience, and I think those are even more interesting because he brings something of his own to it. So, yeah, that'll be it for MAXIMUSIC. Okay, so today I'm going to be listening to James Tenney's possibly most famous, most performed postal piece, having never written a note for percussion, written in 1971. And this is the score. It's very, very simple and charming, and it's more of a graphic score with some elements of traditional notation. The joke's pretty obvious. This is his first note for percussion, and it's a very long note, and obviously it's for variable instrumentation, but it's probably most successful on something with a lot of sustain, like a tam tam. Obviously or like a gong. Obviously, the bigger the tam tam, the longer you're probably going to want to spend activating it and getting this gigantic wall of sound. This like bunch of scores I have is from Larry Polanski's um, sort of introduction to Tenney's music. Larry Polanski writes on this one, having never written a note for percussion is my favorite of the postal pieces and extremely popular among many percussionists I've known. Written for John Bergamo, a percussion teacher at Cal Arts. The piece and multiple entendre usually consists of one continuous roll on a tam-tam, although that instrument does not appear on the score, and I think it would be interesting to perform the piece occasionally on another instrument. With a crescendo from quadruple piano to quadruple forte and then back down again, the only duration indication is very long, and the several performances I've heard range from 8 to 20 minutes. All are quite astonishing as the gentle, inaudible hum of the instrument builds into a complex and somewhat frightening chaos of non-periodic spectra, room resonances, illusory tones, and indescribable occurrences with the listener's psyche. I think it is fitting that it is the last of the scorecards, for in a way it most clearly expresses the intent of the whole set. Incidentally, the titular claim, as far as I know, was true. Um, yeah, we were looking at this week two other percussion pieces from this set from 1965, and this is like the whole other end of the spectrum, right? His earlier ones, they feel more like Fluxus pieces. They're a little bit clunky, text score type things, and the later ones are more and more like perceptual and like fascinated with human perception and notation, really. So they sort of get more interesting as you work through them, and this is probably the most interesting one. I'm gonna go back to this album from 2015 and listen to this 14-minute version. Link is in the description, and I'll let you know my thoughts. I don't think I've ever taken the time to really listen to this, so I'm excited, and my knowledge of headphones has improved dramatically recently, so I'm excited to just listen to it with good in-ear monitors and just lay back and take it all in. So I'll see you in 15 minutes or so. Nice, yeah. So this is definitely worth the listen. It's a good rendition of it. I guess part of me is like I don't know what I expected. Like it sounds like exactly how you'd expect it to sound. Probably sounds very different in a live setting. Like I think if you, I mean, I would really love to put this on in a concert, but as a stereo recording, I mean, it's gonna sound the way it sounds, kind of thing. I was surprised. This performance, it stayed at its loudest for a really long time, and it had this weird effect where I was like mentally processing um, the like hitting of the tam tam, like these low frequencies, and I was sort of separating them from the high shimmering frequencies, and it sounded almost like you were just hitting a big drum. Um, and it was very weird. But yeah, like the sustain layer had a different, more tam tam equality than the more percussive layer, which was like just sounded like a bass drum almost. So that was a very weird psychoacoustic thing that happened to me. Um, and it is a very cool piece, and it's very sort of Tenney-ish. It's very emblematic of like what Tenney's music is about and what his music from 1971 onward is going to sound like. Um, so yeah, that's that one. If I just pull up the list here, we're going to be listening to a couple Christian Wolff pieces, which I think are both for snare drum, which will be an interesting detour. If you haven't noticed, my like the percussion pieces are not all categorized under percussion, hence why the list is kind of weirdly separated into different instrumentations. But yeah, next will be the snare drum pieces, so I'm excited for that. Today I'm going to be listening to this short piece by American composer Christian Wolff, who was a member of the um, New York School, and this is called Snare Drum Peace March for Stuart Saunders Smith. It's just a little bit, yeah, it's like a page and a half of music, and there's some performance notes at the end here. So play using fingers of right hand for notes with stems going up, left for those going down. Uh, repeat. Okay, play the first four lines, ignoring the ties. Repeat the first four lines, observing the ties. Then play the upper part of the remaining systems. Repeat the upper part using the right hand only, together with the lower part, for which you use the left hand. Additionally, you can play the last four systems again at the end, using sticks for the top part while whistling the bottom, or 1 through 4. You just play through 1 through 4 again, and then play 1 through 5, or you could play a selection of 1 through 5. So I guess once all the material is presented, then the piece becomes a bit loose and you can extend it. So some performances I've seen online are like 4 minutes. I don't know if that's a long version or a short version. And snares can be on or off ad lib. So, I mean, it's very well notated, but there's all these interesting little performance things added um, to make it more interesting. So Christian Wolff is a living composer, born in 1934, became an American citizen in 1946. Before that, he was German, and he studied composition with John Cage in 1950, and he quickly became associated with Cage. He's almost completely self-taught. He studied classics and became an expert on the Euripides. Like John Cage, he collaborated with Merce Cunningham, the dancer and choreographer. Stuart Saunders Smith was a percussionist who probably premiered this piece, as well as a composer. And I don't have any of his scores, but maybe he'd be worth checking out. He was born in 48 and died just last year. Apparently, Stuart Saunders Smith's percussion theater music forms the core of that literature. So, would be kind of cool to visit that in combination with these Wolff pieces, but alas, I don't have any Smith scores. And if you want to listen to the recording I'm listening to, it's in the video description. And yeah, I'll see you in 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, so this was a decent enough performance by Andres Navarro Garcia. This was performed at a percussion festival in Spain. I didn't notice, yeah, the dynamics are ad-libbed, which I wasn't expecting. Like, he has these in this performance, he did very dramatic shifts of dynamics just kind of like randomly, which made it much harder to follow, actually. And he did go through it. I think he did the first 4 lines, then again, and then he did just the right hand. And then I think he repeated this second half again with sticks and whistling the third line, which is indicated in optional 4 here. And yeah, I don't think he did much more than that in this performance. But it also doesn't specify where you hit the drum, so I thought it was kind of interesting that this performer was playing with his fingers for the most part, but he was hitting the top of the drum, the sides of it, the bottom, like tapping the snare into the bottom of the drum, and it all sort of obscures what's represented in notation, like quite a bit. But I think you kind of have to do it just to keep it interesting because it's so many like eighths and just meter changes. So yeah, interesting. Um, I don't listen to that much Christian Wolff, um, but there's another one I have for snare drum here. the second snare drum piece march. So we'll look at this next session. Okay, so today I'm going to listen to another snare drum piece by Christian Wolff. It's called Exercise 27. And this is called the second snare drum piece march. We looked at Exercise 26 a couple days ago. It also had this title, and it was also dedicated to Stuart Saunders Smith. I guess they're almost always performed together, so it's pretty much like two movements of the same piece, but technically they are different pieces. Both of them written in 1988. And this one has a much vaguer performance note. The previous one gave all sorts of like instructions about how to go through the score. This one is more like consider various ways of playing the snare drum. So fingertips, nails, knuckles, one at a time, tapping, snapping, plucking the snares. Notes longer than a quarter note usually trill. It's kind of interesting indication. Or you could like scrape the drum head or slide across it. Try out some different tempi and pick one that works for you. It's kind of an interesting indication. So overall, it's very loose, like what this one can sound like. There are 3 voices at one point. It seems to be very brief. And there's lots of long held notes, so I think it's fairly easy to play this with 2 hands. Unlike the previous one, which had a more extended section with 3 voices, and the composer suggested whistling one of the voices, or sort of instructed you to do that. This one has a greater variety of note values, and whereas the first one, the exercise 26, it was very like subtle in the differences of note value. It was mostly just like changing meters and eighth notes, straight eighth notes. This is a lot more interesting, and I think will be a bit more of a dynamic performance. I'm just going to go to the same recording I was looking at last time. So, yeah, I think the first one ended around 4 minutes. Yeah, I'll let you know my thoughts after this other viewing here. Okay, so again, I used the score. I listened along with the score, so there may be some visual things in the performance that I missed. This interpretation was kind of interesting because he really went for using different implements and not actually using fingertips or like parts of his hand as the performance note suggests. But interesting use of like rubber ball mallet and different implements in this interpretation. It provides a lot of contrast with his performance of the exercise 26, but I don't know if that's what Christian Wolff had in mind. I find this thing with all the long held notes to be much more successful, and like the use of silence. It's a lot more successful than exercise 26, in my opinion. And this performer used a whirly tube, which technically is not a snare drum, but using it just to play rhythms, like long held notes like this, resulted in some interesting effects. And if I was to write for tube like that, I would probably just notate it very simply like this. So that's kind of an interesting discovery, that's sort of what I think is the value in looking at these scores as a composer, is you might realize, oh, I don't need to notate so much to get some interesting sounds and things happening. Overall, my thoughts on the 2 exercises, I think like They're not particularly interesting. I'm not familiar with Christian Wolff's stuff, but I know he has a lot of text scores. But I think by the 80s, late 80s, like this is not particularly revolutionary, and it's actually kind of conservative in its notation. Like we've had the whole Fluxus movement happen at this point, and this just looks like something John Cage would have written in like the 1930s. So yeah, that's my thoughts on exercise 27 by Christian Wolff. Let me pull up the next piece here. So I think we're going to look at this piece by Matthew Burtner called Sxueak, which is for squeaky toys. And I will let you know in advance, even though this is a solo percussion series, I won't be able to find a solo performance. It's for any number of players, but the smallest I could find online was like duos. So, uh, but I do want to look at the piece just for the sake of it. So that'll be next. All right. So today's piece is a piece for percussion and electronics by Matthew Burtner. We're gonna listen to a interpretation of it. It's a little bit open. It's from 2008 and it's called Sxueak. You can see some squeaky toys here. And this is the program note, I think. It was inspired by my soprano saxophone, a squeaky toy. The first version was composed for reed instrument and squeaky toys. Special thanks to Lisa Cella, Morris Pelter, and Jane Regular, who played squeaky toys in the first version. I decided this version without sax could work because of their excellent first performances. And then we got some performance notes and then the score. So let's go through the performance notes here. Can be for any number of players. If it's for one player, they should use 6 different squeaky toys. And in an ensemble, each player should use at least 2 squeaky toys. Choose toys that can play a variety of sounds, have a visual impact on stage, and then some theatrical potential. In the first official performance of this version, this was at Monkeytown, USA. Mike Strauss, Ted Coffey, Halle Abgari, Morris Palter used a penguin, a corn man, a foot, a caterpillar, a spider, a bone, a football, and a hamburger. I wonder if those are here. Definitely the hamburgers there. Yeah, each toy has a particular range of sounds and lends itself well to particular types of interactions. And the score is a graphic score. Each toy should be approached for its squeezability, pokeability, twistability, rhythmic punctuation, as in like short, sharp notes, and then its potential for sustained sounds. It looks like it's pretty loose. Like we got these symbols here: dynamic squeaking, squeezing, twisting, poking, changing the toy, irregular squeaks, long drawn out squeaks, rhythmic patterns. And then the electronics look like this, and the score looks like this. So it's a little bit complicated, but it's like a very condensed score, right? You have like 2.5 minutes on this first page, and then the minute 5 and a bit is at the end here, right? And it's just sort of telling you to play something like these rhythms. You start sparse and then you incorporate all these other things over the course of each minute. Looks like it was all assembled in Adobe Illustrator, like this graphic score at least. And then probably the most useful directions are actually the text directions at the bottom, because these indicate like
um, different like theatrical things you're going to do on stage, which is what the like audience is going to remember and probably what makes the piece. Things like raising the toy above your head, picking up several toys and then setting them back down, making a loud squeak with the one that is then set down. So yeah, emphasis on playfulness and theatricality. What I like about Burtner's notes is he's very careful to acknowledge all the people involved in the performance and premiere of the piece, like the first people to make it happen. Let's have a look at the composer here. Composer, sound artist, electric or eco acoustics. Okay. Um, I know nothing about him, by the way. I'm just like ad-libbing here. Alaskan-born composer. Yeah, I guess his eco acoustic work is his most successful because his music's been featured by, I guess, in some capacity, the BBC, the U.S. State Department, and National Geographic. So lots of pieces about climate change, seemingly, which I guess he's very poised to observe being in Alaska or having grown up in Alaska. He's a professor of music at the University of Virginia and co-directs the Coastal Future Conservatory. And he's founder and director of the Alaskan nonprofit EcoSono. And he has an album out on Ravello Records called Icefield from 2022. What's kind of interesting here is the connection to University of Virginia. Seems like he has a very steady source of income that allows him to engage in these other projects. Now, I do want to look up all of the people he mentioned just out of curiosity, but I might have to sort of assemble them together here. Okay, so these first three people who worked on the first version, Lisa Cella and Jane Rigler, are both flautists, and Morris Palter is a percussionist. I believe Morris is Canadian and the other two are American. Yeah. So probably premiered in an academic context, I would guess, as all of these people have like academic positions. Monkeytown is a city in West Virginia, probably close to the University of Virginia, I would imagine. Yeah, so these first three names, well, I guess, yeah, we already talked about Morris Palter, but these other names who did the first performance of the second version, Mike Strauss is, I believe, a saxophonist, an American saxophonist, and then Ted Coffey is a electronic musician and sound artist, and Haleh Abgari is a Iranian visual artist, probably also a sound artist. And I'm sure all these people have connections to University of Virginia in some way. So yeah, the premiere was actually a quartet. The version we're going to be listening to today is just a duo. And yeah, seems like a pretty fun little piece. The recording I'm listening to today is in the video description, and I'll let you know my thoughts. Okay, yeah, I thought this was fun. I'm glad I took the time to watch a performance of it because it does have a nice slow build to it, especially this performance. I like the number of different toys they have in this performance, and they also incorporate some like saxophone and bass clarinet mouthpieces. It seems I couldn't tell because of the quality of the video, but that seems to be a nod to the first version of the piece, which I guess had soprano saxophone. I got this piece through a workshop called, well, I'm not gonna name it, but it was a workshop for like electronic music and instruments, and I think either the previous year or the same year, I actually had a piece with sampled like squeaky toys, and I think it was a little bit controversial among some of the faculty members. So I don't know what, like, if I sort of inspired some of the faculty to find a piece that sort of like, was within the establishment and did the same thing. Um, but I like to think that that's what happened because um, it's just like when you're a no name and you have an original idea, it often creates waves like this, right? And then people end up finding pieces like this, and it's funny how it kind of circles back to you, and it's like, oh, now I know about this piece, and I don't know if it's definitely doing something completely different with the same sounds. Like I don't know if it's going to inform my practice at all, but it's kind of funny. Like whatever idea you have, you can always find a way to justify it, and sometimes other people will find a way to justify what you did. You know what I mean? Um, so I guess it's just encouraging that virtually everything has been done, especially in something as experimental as like mixed media, um, classical music. So don't be afraid to make a squeaky toy piece, I guess is my point. Next, I think we are getting into the vibraphone pieces, and I actually have quite a few. I have no marimba pieces or glockenspiel pieces, just vibes. So I'm excited to get into that. And yeah, we'll take a break from the unpitched stuff for a while. This morning I'm going to be listening to a piece by Karlheinz Essl, Austrian composer, called 300 Notes. This piece exists in three versions, one for piano, one for vibraphone, and one for toy piano. We're going to be listening to the vibraphone version because we're in the middle of a percussion series. That's the current series right now. And yeah, I think all three of them were written in 2019, and they're more or less the same. So the piano version was the original one. Sustained pedal is to be depressed throughout the piece. Use a medium soft mallet. Um, yeah, the tempo encompasses a wide range from slow to extremely fast, and it gradually gets faster over the course of the piece. Here's the harmonic structure. So he gives you these chords. So the piece sort of slowly converges on an F, looks like. And it starts with these Fs and octaves. He even provides a link to the MP3 in here. And yeah, the score is free, so we may as well peruse it a little bit. Like it's freely available on his website. Um, it's just 3 pages. Each page ends in a fermata, and it looks like it starts quiet on each page, and there's a big crescendo um, and decrescendo. So it's like three big swells, kind of. So I discovered Essel's music through, I think I was looking at this American project called the Toy Piano Library, and his name kept popping up because he has like several toy piano pieces and pieces for toy piano and electronics. Um, so this sort of led me to his website, and he's really good at documenting his music. Like you can find recordings and scores for all of his pieces. So I downloaded a bunch of them. Um, and I've listened to most of them. Mostly I just downloaded like piano and toy piano stuff. Um, he was born in 1960, studied composition with Friedrich Kerha in Vienna, wrote his dissertation on the music of Anton Webern, and he was a double bassist, or I guess he is a double bassist, and has played in many ensembles. Composer in residence at Darmstadt from 1990 to 1994. Composer in residence at IRCAM from 91 to 93, so those two things overlapped. Taught algorithmic composition at Bruckner University in Linz from 95 to 2006. And since then, he's been professor of composition and electroacoustic music at University of Music and Performing Arts, Vienna. He's super prolific as well. Like if you go through his website, he has just a ton of pieces for all kinds of instrumentations, and he's very fluent in electronic music. Like he does code and make his own. Like I think he made his own Max library of sorts, and yeah, really, really educated person and kind of an ideal career, which in many countries most composers can't even imagine. Just going from position to position after his degrees. Okay, enough about that. There's a link in the video description to this recording. I'm just gonna have a listen to it. It's not gonna take much out of your day. It's just 4 minutes long. You'll probably spend more time listening to me talk than listening to the piece. So I encourage you to pause the video here and have a listen. So I'm surprised that this was written for piano first, because I think this really makes a lot more sense to have all this repeated note stuff on a vibraphone. And this single melodic line stuff really works well on vibes. The pedal has no trouble like blurring everything, which is nice. And there's obviously a lot of little procedural games going on that are really fun, which are a lot more apparent when you start listening to it. Like clearly the first page and the third page are like mirror images of one another in terms of pitch. The tempi, something else is going on. Then the middle page you have the different chords are like interleaved. They're like alternating between one another. So you get this weird like juxtaposition of stuff in the middle section. And possibly there's two things layered, right? Because you have two voices going on at the same time. So maybe it's more like two chords are happening at the same time in every measure. Also, I noticed in this part that you have like four notes in the first measure, then five, then six, then seven, then eight. So like there's stuff like that going on too, which you have to be aware of. Like the number of notes is also fluctuating, and it strikes a nice balance of like being minimalistic enough that you can hear all this stuff, and also layered enough that it's like verging on modernist, like something Ligeti would do. So yeah, it's a cute little piece. We'll probably be looking at a lot more Essl if we ever get around to doing the toy piano scores I have. But for now, I think this is a good introduction to what he's about. Lots of procedurally generated music, and the influence of serial music is obvious as well. So yeah, do check him out. Next is going to be another vibes piece. Yeah, I think this is an American composer, Vanhassel. I only ever see his music at American conferences, so probably that'll be up next. Right, so this morning I'm going to be listening to this vibraphone piece by Dan Vanhassel. I guess vibraphone and electronics piece. It's called Fracture. It's 10 minutes long. 2018, premiered in Framingham, Massachusetts. This is what the score looks like from the start here. Pedal is down the whole time. Fairly slow tempi. Spacious, mysterious, evocative, molto rubato, dedicated to Joey Vanhassel. So we got some people to look up here, just to kind of get the origins of the piece. See if there's a program note here. Two-part counterpoint between noise and pitch. Expanding the sonic palette of the vibraphone. Calm, floating melody that expands and contracts. Lots of good language here. Pretty easy to grasp without being too technical. And was commissioned by and dedicated to the composer's brother, Joseph Vanhassel, supported by a Live Arts Boston grant from the Boston Foundation. I don't really know a lot about this composer, but I heard his name come up a lot of times in sort of the electronic music scene in the Midwest in the US and also in the South to some extent. But I guess it's a Boston-based composer. You see his name come up a lot in this or that conference. Let's see. So he's a multi-instrumentalist as well as a composer. And he's been featured in, here's the list, Mata Festival, Gaudeamus Music Week, ICMC, Bowling Green New Music Festival, Toy Piano Festival, Uncaged is what it's called. Did Bang on a Can Summer Festival. I think the Bowling Green connection is probably why I heard of him so much. Like, there's a lot of Bowling Green composers at University of North Texas when I attended. And yeah, now he's assistant professor of composition at BOCO. And he's also taught at MIT, Brandeis, UC Berkeley, Clark University, and Connecticut College. So I imagine he's like mid-career or pretty far into his career, maybe. Yeah, he looks like he's pretty good about documenting all his pieces. I'll just switch accounts here and follow his YouTube channel. Okay, I'm going to give this a listen. First time listening. A link to this video is in the description to my video. And yeah, if you want my opinions, stick around. If not, just click on that link. Okay, yeah. So I thought this was an interesting piece. It's very groovy. It's got a lot of like 4/3 or 3/2 stuff going on. And it kind of just plugs away at this beat. Um, and it was kind of interesting. It sort of has this low level like background layer of vibraphone. So you see a lot of like low register and middle register vibraphone playing. It hardly ever goes above the C5. And then you have all this high multi-perc stuff, and the electronics mostly sits on top. Um, the Probably the most impressive section is the opening section, where the like difference between the electronics and the vibraphone are like more subtle, and it's like a slow build. By the end of the piece, it kind of loses me a little bit. The samples just get kind of goofy sounding, and not I don't see the connection like to the percussion. Uh, but yeah, some stuff about the electronics, I guess. Uh, so the part uses max patch. All you have to do is hit the pedal and in two different sections. Um, and then you just follow a click track basically. He does a good job of listing all the stuff you need. You need two speakers, a computer, an audio interface. Here we got a little Focusrite, probably a 4 output one. or something. And then headphones, and obviously USB like MIDI pedal. You can see it under the vibraphone here. Um, I should also mention that this performer, Matt Sherrock, is a really big proponent of contemporary music in Boston, and he's half of this ensemble called Transient Canvas, which is for they commission marimba and bass clarinet pieces, sometimes with electronics, sometimes not. Um, yeah, I think this piece was pretty like indicative of a lot of the stuff going on in the US as of late in the sort of mixed media world. It's like accessible in some ways and uh, also very conservative in other ways, and sort of harkens back to this tradition of pieces for classical instruments and electronics. And yeah, it's pretty polished. Like there's not a lot of negative things to say about it. Okay, I think we have one other piece with vibraphone, and it's by João Pedro Oliveira. This is a composer that we haven't looked at since the string quartet series, like almost 9 months ago now. Probably more, probably like almost, yeah, 10, 11 months ago. So it'll be good getting back into his stuff. He also does a lot of this type of mixed media work with electronics, so it may even be a vibraphone and electronics piece. Yeah, it is. So if you're a vibraphonist, obviously this is a very um, easy thing to find. Works with fixed media, and it's fun. You should probably do it. As a percussionist, I think it helps to be versatile. So yeah, that's it for our one and only Dan Vanhassel feature. Okay, so this morning I'm gonna listen to some Christopher Poovey. There's two percussion pieces by him that I want to get to. I'm not sure which one we're doing first. Yeah, let's do the drum kit piece first. So this piece is Cybernetic Overload, written in 2018. I saw a performance of this at University of Kansas, uh, and that was in, it must have been 2019. So yeah, it was a recent piece. I had a piano piece on the same concert. It was like a composer exchange thing between the University of North Texas and KU. And yeah, Chris and I were in the same doctoral program at UNT. I believe he also has some degree from IU, Indiana University. Um, but we'll get to his bio in a bit here. He's got a map for how to visualize the drum set on the staff, and there's some prepared things. Opera gong on the snare, crash on the low tom, and a small resonant cymbal, I guess, on the same on the medium tom. So rim shot notation, that's pretty standard. This thunderbolt articulation means a scrape, and then there's a different scrape for the cymbals, different scrape articulation. And then a hand cymbal for muting. It's kind of nice. And then he gets into the preparations a bit more detailed here on their own page. Yeah, so Chris is composer, creative coder, media artist, and this VR opera on the front of his website is his doctoral project. Um, Highly recommend checking that out. I guess he's had some stuff last year at Mock Sonic, um, Cube Fest, Talon Music Week Festival, and then of course, yeah, he did something at UNT for the semi anniversary. I forgot about that thing. Yeah, he did his two graduate degrees at UNT and his BM at IU. He taught at Oberlin College, I think for like a year, straight out of his doctorate. Yeah, he mentions at the end here that he developed software using Max and C Sound, and from what I remember, he built a reverb that was really cool while at UNT, and also he made a Max patch that ran all the diffusion software for our sort of black box theater, the Merrill Ellis Intermedia Theater, which has like over 32 speakers. And that I'm sure they're still using that diffusion software now. Okay, let's give it a listen. I've put a link to a video recording of this in the description to this video if you're interested. I highly encourage you to listen along. Okay, so yeah, this is a nice score and a nice short piece. I don't know what Chris's thoughts are on the piece nowadays. It's pretty old at this point, but I thought it struck a nice balance between like drum set moments and like more multi-percussion moments, right? Because at the end of the day, it is just like a multi-percussion setup, but it has this like cultural association. So he does like have this DNB groove moment and this glitch out moment, which sort of hint at the actual like cultural object. And obviously, the whole first movement is kind of focused on building up to that. And then the second movement, it's more like um, metals, like sustained vibrating cymbals and things, which is something that like when I was writing up a drum set piece in my undergrad, I had a teacher tell me like that sort of stuff is much easier to listen to for long periods of time than just like straight drumming. And I think I tend to agree with that. It's like much more delicate sound world to live in. Um, so I like that contrast, and there's a couple ideas that I really like. Like I like this the introduction of a couple sustained things, like the crash at the end here. And there's one other big one is I think it was a hi-hat maybe or a ride. Yeah, just to hit the ride cymbal at towards the climax of this first page. Whereas everything else is very like sharp and staccato. And then uh, doing the opposite in the second movement, having these moments where you choke the cymbal and or cut the sound off and have the bass drum cut it off. Um, yeah, it's a nice touch. A pretty unassuming little score. I think Chris was. I remember at the time that this was being performed in 2019, Chris was pretty happy with like the number of performances he was getting of it, and I think that's sort of one of the nice things about writing for percussion, and I can definitely relate to that. Like when you um, approach a medium you've never approached before, and it ends up being really um, successful. So I hope it continues to get performed. And next, we're going to look at another percussion piece of his for hi-hat and electronics. Today I'm going to listen to this piece by American composer Christopher Poovey for hi-hat and electronics. It's called Within Waves and was composed in 2020. I'm guessing like right at the height of the pandemic. You need a hi-hat, 8 thimbles, beeswax, 2 dynamic microphones, placed on either side. The max patch, obviously. I guess it's live electronics. 8 speakers minimum. Um, digital audio converter capable of 8-channel output, and if possible, a high density speaker array is preferred. I like how concise all this is. Um, yeah, that's pretty big requirements, like in terms of putting it on, but I think aside from stereo in the sort of electroacoustic world, 8-channel is probably the next most common format. Some symbols, so pedal press, chaotic scraping, smooth scrape, rolling fingers on the cymbal, rubbing the cymbal. Um, a lot of these look like sort of articulations that are going to be above the staff, and they seem to be very carefully designed, maybe in Adobe Illustrator or something. Oh, maybe they are the note. Okay, so it's sort of like a spectral notation where the note head extends into these things. Okay, cool. Pretty open. So like each system is 16 seconds long. He has the sides of the hi-hat divided into 2 staves, so kind of like one for each hand. This performance is by, does it say? Nick B. I'm not sure the last name, but it's a performance at Electronic Music Midwest, um, which is a sort of like fairly big electronic music festival, which alternates between 2 small colleges in the Midwestern US. This was the one in Romeoville. I believe the other one is in Kansas City, Kansas. I'm gonna just give this a listen. It's a bit longer than I expected based on the score, but I guess it's like a minute per page of score. So I'll see you in 9 minutes, and I highly encourage you to click on the link to this in the video description and have a listen yourself. Okay, yeah, so this was an interesting performance. You really get I really got the pitch of this hi-hat stuck in my head over the course of the piece. But there was a pretty good variety of sounds. I like the beeswax moment towards the end of the piece. I'm not used to hearing like friction type sounds on hi-hat, and it's kind of cool. Um, yeah, it all seems very well put together and clearly something that Chris like worked out himself on an actual hi-hat. It sort of made me think of another UNT person. This Professor Panayiotis Kokoros has a cymbal piece that's also kind of this length. And yeah, it's like there's oddly like a bit of a repertoire. I don't know. I also had I also saw this piece at a workshop in Montreal uh, by Laura Schwartz, which was like a hi-hat and electronics piece. So I was more like a hi-hat and video piece. But you could program a whole concert with this sort of limited percussion setup, and I think it'd be fairly interesting. I can't say I have too much to say about it. I'm noticing that Chris likes these sort of segmented forms with his pieces where they're sort of not, they kind of are in multiple movements, but also not. So that's kind of interesting about this piece. I realize now that I skipped over a vibraphone piece. Um, so that's what we'll do next for episode 200, I think. Okay, so today's piece is by João Pedro Oliveira. It's called Vox Sum Vitae, and it's for vibraphone and electronics. The score starts here, and it looks like the electronics are like kind of semi-notated in the staff above. And we have a mix of like metered music and also music that's split up into like durations. He has a nice zero time signature thing going on. Commissioned by the Atelier de Composição and Oficina Musicale. I guess that's a granting body of some sort. Almost 10 minutes long. It's a pretty significant piece. Yeah, this must have been a pretty significant commission just because 9 minutes of fixed media is not it's not cheap. I mean, you got to spend a lot of time in the studio to make that. And Joao's electronics are usually very well produced and like seamlessly blend with the performer, sort of imitating live electronics. He has some aleatoric-ish notations, like box notation, um, the senza majora notation I was mentioning before, uh, tremolos as fast as possible. There's a note about the accidentals and trilling and feather beam stuff. It's in 6 channel. That's weird. Obviously in stereo pairs. I don't think I've ever seen a 6 channel piece in compass point. 2 of the speakers should be on stage with the vibraphone. And yeah, there's a click track for the whole piece. Unfortunately, I won't be able to hear the actual piece because I don't have a studio with 8 speakers. So I'm just going to be listening to a stereo version of it. Not that I would have the 8 channel files anyways, I'd have to ask him for them. But yeah, it looks kind of interesting. Okay, I've talked about João on a previous episode, so if you want to learn more about him, I would go there. Um, Title below. And yeah, I think we should just get into it. Um, the recording is in the video description, and I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, so my thoughts on this. It was difficult to follow along, I think, because the score is kind of loose and, um, well, it's not loose per se, but performances sort of fluctuate a lot, or the performance I was listening to fluctuated a lot in tempo. Um, and it's sort of like needlessly rhythmically complicated, and the electronics actually really obscure um, what the performer is doing when you listen to it in a stereo mixdown like this. But I'd be curious to hear it live to see how this is like spatialized and stuff. Some things I liked about it was it sort of unapologetically just used the typical vibraphone sound, just like loudly playing the vibraphone. And that sort of shaped the types of subtle electronic sounds you would get, which were all kind of like bell-like or chime-like. And I guess there's something appealing about it to percussionists because the first thing I noticed when I looked it up on YouTube was like, God, there are a lot of performances of this thing. Like a lot of people are playing it clearly. So I think it's pretty successful. Next session is going to be our last percussion piece and another one with electronics. I'm kind of enjoying this turn that the series has taken into all of these like electroacoustic composers from the US who, I've seen their work in conferences. They've shaped my career somewhat. And it's kind of nice just like taking a detour and recognizing how much repertoire there is for percussion in this sort of area. Uh, yeah, and that time and place kind of thing. So yeah, that's it for Vox Sum Vitae.
So today I'm going to be listening to a percussion and electronics piece by Keith Kirchoff. Actually, I think it's a rare text file, so I have to open it in Word. Yeah, so the piece was called One. It's kind of for variable instrumentation, and it was written in 2013. And the instrumenter object must be amplified, and it can be striked with any object or mallet you want. Um, it sounds like it has to be like one thing, though, hence the title. And yeah, it's mostly exists in a max patch with 68 cues, which you can advance with a spacebar or I guess a MIDI pedal, which is set to the same MIDI value as spacebar. I don't know if that's 32 or something. Uh, yeah, there's instructions in the patch itself. Cues 1 and 2 record the player's sound. When you're playing cue 2, it should be louder than cue 1. And they both only last a few seconds. And then from Q3 to Q68, you're just improvising. It's just free improv time. Uh, Q66, you stop playing your object, I guess, and then 69 pieces over. And yeah, I found this recording on Bandcamp of it, which kind of fascinated me because it was actually a album that Keith shared with Sarah Hennies, who's a New York percussionist composer who I wish I had some of her scores. You should really check them out. But this is a 16-minute version of it, of Keith's piece. And I guess this was released 4 years after the piece was made. And yeah, this I was exploring this Bandcamp account a bit. It's called How Things Are Made. They're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They release a lot of contemporary music stuff and new music, but it's all like improvised. Just a little bit about Keith. So he's a virtuosic pianist who is part of the Splice Ensemble, which is a trio for percussion, trumpet, and piano, which is associated with this organization in the US, the Splice. I guess there's an institute and a festival, so the Splice Festival and Splice Institute. Um, I've done the Splice Institute a couple of times. It's a little bit more accessible than the festival, and it's always held in Kalamazoo, Michigan at Western University, whereas the festival kind of switches cities. So they sort of like commission pieces every year because some participants of the institute get the honor of writing for them every year. Um, and yeah, as for his composition, I don't know so much about it. Let's see. This paragraph seems to be all about his work as a pianist. His compositions have been presented throughout the US, Canada, UK, Turkey, Holland, Mexico, New Zealand, Australia, and Germany. And commissions from Transient Canvas. This is a Boston-based duo. Hinge Quartet, I think it's also American. Ensemble Maison. He's been commissioned by pianists to write piano works, which is kind of cool. Xiao Ding, Kai Schumacher, and he's also been commissioned by this baritone Nathan Kruger. So very established in his scene. His teachers include Dean Kramer, Stephen Drury, and Paul Worth. Bachelor of Music from University of Oregon. Okay, so there's a UO connection to Splice that I didn't know about. And master's degree from NEC, which is in Boston, which might explain the Transient Canvas Commission.
Also studied with Michael Gandolfi and Jeffrey Stollett. Yeah, he works a lot with electronics clearly and releases a lot of recordings. I guess I could have been looking at the short bio, but yeah, there you go. I mean, his catalog, lots of solo and chamber, and only one orchestra piece. And thank God he's just upfront with what he does best and what he's best known for. So the link to this recording is in the video description. I encourage you to listen to it. I was looking at it a bit the other day and it seemed really interesting. So, yeah, I'll see you in 15 minutes or 17 minutes-ish and let you know what I think. Okay, so I thought this was a really successful performance of this piece. I'd love to see it live, just because the performance, at least the way it's recorded in this, it blends really seamlessly with the electronics, which might be the point. I think the percussion instrument here was some unpitched metal thing with two different mallets, maybe like a cowbell or something. Um, and there was a lot of short clipped, just like attack kind of sounds for the first half, and then you get a lot of more bell-like tones, and then weird like more almost wooden sounds closer to the end. So there's a lot of variety there just in the patch itself, and it's hard to believe it's all. I think it's all just processed, like it's just all whatever you record in the beginning. I'm curious how it would sound with something pitched, like maybe a glockenspiel or something. Um, just because I wasn't hearing a lot of like changes in pitch, I was hearing a lot of more like maybe octave shifts or like different filterings of the same pitched sound. So I think this was a really good representation of what it could be. Yeah, hopefully looking at the score with me helped you understand what's going on in this a little bit. Um, I'm going to a new music concert later today, which is going to be a lot more conservative, and I'm kind of bummed that I don't get to see stuff like this in Winnipeg so much, which is where I'm at. Um, because I think this would just be a great first half to a new music concert. I think it would. It's unlike like no one in my city is doing live electronics, like literally nobody. So it's missing. Like it's from a lot of cities, even mid-sized cities. Um, yeah, so that's it for the percussion series. I can pull up the list. My thoughts on this collection of scores is like there's definitely too many white men, but there's a lot of more recent pieces, like in the second half especially. There's a lot more stuff from the past 5 years. Um, and there's a good amount of American stuff. Like, let's see, the last six pieces and the Tenney, so nine of the and the Feldman. So yeah, a lot of American percussion music, which is kind of cool, and a lot of like text scores and different things. And um, I think if you just pick a random 13 percussion scores, you're gonna have a real variety of stuff, even though they do have their more conservative like rep as well. Next series, I'm not sure what it's gonna be. I can pull up the wheel and just figure it out now, actually. I usually like to start uh like the first episode of a series I do this, but I'll do it now because I want to know. Yeah, let's see what's up with this. Okay, wow. So I am doing piano. There's like 300 scores. Um, well, it'll be something to work through, I guess. Also, I'll be pretty like stern about like if I can't find a recording, I'm not listening kind of thing. Even though I could probably play a lot of my scores, I'm just not gonna do it because I don't want to like take forever doing this. So okay, piano it is.